The first thing we need to look at in this problem is the word interval notation. Interval notation is a simplified notation that uses parentheses and or brackets. Another thing to remember is if a number is less than 0, it'll go off to negative infinity, and then if it is bigger than 0, it'll go off to positive infinity. One thing to keep in mind, when we use positive and negative infinity, we will always use parentheses. Another thing we should look at is we have two inequalities put together with the word or. When we look at or, we know that there is either going to be a union between these two lines or an intersection. Union is denoted by the U symbol, while intersection is denoted by the upside down U. So we need to keep this in mind as we look for our problem. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to solve each set of these inequalities. To solve these inequalities, we're first going to look at the one on the left. We want to break them into two separate inequalities so we can get our final answer. To solve the one on the left, we want to make sure we isolate our variable x. To do this, we want to subtract 1 over to the other side. So we end up with 2x is greater than 3 minus 1, which gives us 2. Now, we still want to get x alone. To do this, we want to divide by 2. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. When we do this, the 2's divide to 1, and we get x is greater than 1. Next, we are going to look at the next inequality. To do this, we have the same idea in mind. We want to isolate our variable x. To isolate our variable x, we are going to subtract 1 from the other side. So we end up with negative 4x is greater than or equal to 5 minus 1, which is 4. Now, to isolate this x again, we need to divide by a negative 4. Remembering, when we divide by a negative number, we have to flip our sign. So our 4's will divide to 1, and we'll get x is less than or equal to negative 1. And again, we do this because we are dividing by a negative number. Now that we solve each inequality, our last step is to put it into interval notation. For interval notation, we know we're either going to use parentheses or brackets. If we look at our first inequality, we know x is greater than 1. So our x will go off into infinity. And we also know with infinity that we need a parentheses with it. And then we have our 1. Since x is greater than 1, not greater than or equal to, we know 1 also has a parenthesis by it. Our next inequality, x is less than or equal to negative 1, we know that since x is less than, our x is going to go to negative infinity. Since we know x is going to negative infinity, we then can write our 1. Since x is less than or equal to negative 1, it has that equal to, so we know our negative 1 needs a bracket. Now that we have our two inequalities written in interval notation, we are just missing one key point. Our solutions have an or in between them, so we need to rearrange them and write them in order. So our final answer should look parenthesis, negative infinity to negative 1 bracket, or means we use the union symbol. So we're going to stick the union symbol in, and then we are going to write our next inequality, 1 to infinity. And that should be our final answer. As you can see, our answer matches letter B.